I never left it on the ground. I'm not coming down. I want to go higher, higher, higher than that.
Welcome back to the Business is Human podcast, where we discuss strategies to increase our VRI, value, relevance, and impact. We're here to blend meaningful work with profitable success. I'm your host, Rebecca Fleetwood Hession, here to steward what we call the age of humanity, to transform the way we work so we can transform the way that we live. As always, my friendly request, if you like what you hear, hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And then leave a review to tell the other humans that they might like it too. Always looking to help you and connect with others. Let's get into it, shall we? In this episode, I invited our guest, Anne Shoemaker, to come on and talk a little bit about failure, because as humans, it's a part of the deal. And because Anne has a background in collegiate and professional soccer, she knows about winning and losing and has a rich career, real estate, nonprofits, now an executive coach. She just has a way of taking things and breaking it down into some basic stuff that you can do things with. And I loved our conversation, and I know you're going to as well. Here we go. All right. Anne Shoemaker, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we are going to have a robust conversation because I know we are kindred spirits just from looking at your bio and talking with you briefly today. We do similar work, but with a very different background, which I think is always an interesting, like, how did we get here starting at very different places? So tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your journey and what you're doing now.
I say that I'm a career advisor, strategist, and coach for executive and aspiring executive women. So most of my work is meeting women where they are, which tends to be a lot of the women that I'm working with are going through some sort of change or considering some sort of change in their career, whether that's going for a promotion or changing industries or changing their profession entirely. I've worked with some women who have been lawyers and now they want to open a retail shop or something like that. So an entirely, new venture in their lives. But in terms of my background, I am originally from Kentucky. I now live in North Carolina, and I think I get a lot of my kind of fighting spirit from being from a smaller state that sometimes is the butt of jokes. Growing up, I played soccer. I loved to run around with the boys at that time, and then grew on to actually earn a scholarship to play soccer in college and professionally abroad. Lived and worked in Washington, D.C. At a consulting firm for a year before I lived a couple of years in Sweden, got my master's degree. And then as I look back on my career, it kind of is in two parts. I spent the next 10 years of my career after getting my master's degree working for a large nonprofit. And I had a lot of really great mentors and sponsors, a lot of actually men who took me under their wing and really showed me the ropes and sponsored a lot of ideas that I had and made sure my voice was heard. The second half of my career, I would say like maybe the next 10 years, I had a different experience. I worked for someone who I thought was going to be this great, inspiring leader, and it just did not go the way that I wanted it to. And so in the midst of trying to extricate myself from that situation, I did a lot of soul searching to try to figure out what I wanted to do and really who I wanted to serve. And I couldn't completely find what I was looking for in a corporate role, in a W-2 role, and never had really thought about starting my own business. But I found myself saying, I really, really love to pour into women. I really have loved mentoring and leading women and managing women. So that was who I wanted to serve. So I had that. And then I had to figure out what I had to offer. And I had gotten a lot of great feedback on kind of the mentorship I had provided to women over the years, the women that I had worked with. So I decided to pursue coaching, which is definitely different than mentoring, but that kind of led me to that path. And I've been doing that for the last 5 years. So I do coaching, I do workshops, and anything where I can pour into women, trying to help them find their voice and advocate for themselves and what they're looking for out of their careers.
Oh, I love this. And I just love showcasing for our listeners that everyone has a very unique path in their career. I think we bought into a little bit of a lie that said that there was a linear path to success, however you define that. And I've not found a single person in my 58 years that has had a linear path. And so I think it's really important to just let people share a little bit about how you got to where you are today and inspire people that no matter where you are, you can do something else.
Absolutely. And it's so empowering once we realize that. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to say, oh my gosh, that's so scary. Or, oh my gosh, I couldn't do that. Or I would risk so much. And I have all these commitments. And many of those are probably true. But if we can develop the courage to sit with some of those inner thoughts and inner yearnings for long enough, they can really teach us a lot and take us to some exciting places.
Amen. In fact, that's one of the principles of my coaching is that inner voice is, I call it the Thrive Guide, that's trying to take you to a place of thriving, but you've got to battle it with the inner little bitch in your head that's trying to tell you not to do it, right?
Yes.
But one of the things you said that you did as a reflection point that I want to highlight is you first decided who you wanted to serve. And I think this is, especially now in a post-2020 world where the expectations of success have shifted a little bit from society, that the idea of business as a service and helping and connecting as humans, I think is more important than it's ever been. And so that reflection point for you was really guiding. Any insight about that as a topic?
I actually had a conversation with a client about this yesterday who was kind of looking for what her next step might be and where I found clues. And I just said, and it may just sound very basic, but I said, I looked at the books I was reading, I looked at the podcasts that I kept, wanting to go back to and listen to. And I just followed those little clues into my energy, because we don't usually do things in our leisure time that are going to make us feel down. We do things in our leisure time that are going to make us feel inspired or motivated or excited or have fun with. And so those were things I was doing in my leisure time that I was like, well, what if I could take some of this interest that I have on a personal level and pour into that, use the career skills that I have and kind of marry the two. Brilliant. Yeah, I would say, look at your calendar, where are you spending your time? Look at your checkbook. Look at your
what's your TikTok algorithm?
Yes. What exactly? Maybe not the cat videos, but the other things. But yeah.
That's really insightful because it ties directly into the science of our nervous system that human motivation happens with joy and excitement, and being inspired by something is really what we want to build something that you're moving towards, not moving away from pain. So that's a really great way to, like you said, it's the best things are the basic things. We overcomplicate them with, it's got to be harder than this.
Yes.
Too easy.
Yes. And I love that. I love that you said that, because I do think we can make it so super complicated and think, oh, I need to go back to school and get my MBA to do such and such. And it's like, well, that's one way to do it. There's also a lot of other ways to do it.
A large percentage of the clients, men and women that I work with, their first thought is, I need another certification or another degree if I want to make a change. We've got this external validation bias. And I know you have some passion around, just public perception and societal expectations driving some of that. What are your thoughts about how to flip that?
Oh, 100%. I think part of it, and I'm succumbed to it as well, but I think, we do like to be comfortable, and there's nothing wrong with being comfortable necessarily. It's just that it's not usually where the growth is. And oftentimes, at least I find with the clients that I work with, they're like, I'm not learning anymore. I'm not growing anymore. I want to change something. And the kind of thing that we know how to do, because many of us have had 10, 12, 15, 20 years of education, is I know how to study. I know how to learn. I know how to get a certification. And that's fine. I have some certifications as well. And I think there's a place for that. But we don't have to go to that extent of time and money commitment to explore something new and different. It can be, how about maybe set a goal to have coffee with 3 people in that industry? And let's just start there. Let's just start with a cup of coffee and a conversation. And then let's maybe buy a book. If education or something is needed, then there's a place for it. But back to your point about public perception, I think sometimes we look for that to validate ourselves. that I'm an expert in this and I've got this degree or I've got this certification. Again, I love education. I think it's wonderful. But particularly, a lot of my clients are at mid-career, and there's a huge cost. There's the financial cost, there's time cost to doing these things, and we can explore some of our interests in a very low risk, easy first step way that doesn't involve that external validation of, see, I did it, I got the certificate. What happens if you do all that work and you decide you don't really like that field? You may feel good about yourself that you've done this thing, but that gets back to that more public perception of what you've done versus a lower cost, lower risk way to explore it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you took the cumulative of your career experiences and education experiences and athletic experiences and put that into a summary, that is bigger than a master's degree.
Yes.
That is so much bigger than what somebody else is going to teach you and show you. And I love what you're doing. What you're helping women do is see their lives as an opportunity to shift it, not because what you did before was wrong. You've just been building and growing and exploring things. And I think it's the way that life is supposed to be, but we just got a little misconstrued along the way.
Yes, agreed completely. Yes.
Which I want to bring athletics into this conversation because I love digging into, like I said, the history of how you got to be who you are with some of these experiences. And one of the things that you speak on and coach on is failure. And if you think about athletics, it literally is showing up each week and winning or losing.
Yes.
Right? I mean, weekly, or maybe you had 2 games a week. I don't know what the soccer schedule is, but your formative years of how you saw the world was, we're either going to win or we're going to lose.
Right.
How does that play into the way you see the world with failure and all that today?
Oh, I love this question. I love this question. There's so many things. I'll totally geek out here for a minute on athletics. But if you think about athletics, let's just say, you have, in this case, let's say 2 practices a week and a game on the weekends. So you have 2 practices, the word practice, right? You're going to try some things in a safe environment with your team where the stakes are low. You've got a low stakes time to say, I'm going to try this new move. I might fall down. I might trip. I might just not even pull it off. I might get it 1 out of 5 times to try this new, move that I'm trying to do. And then I'm going to try that in a drill. And then we're going to scrimmage, and I'm going to try and do it in the scrimmage. And we're trying and we're trying and we're trying and we're failing repeatedly. And then we do it again the next practice. And then we have a game. And the choice is ours as to whether or not we take that risk and try that new move in the game or not. But regardless, we're going to go out there and be vulnerable, try next to all of our other witnesses / teammates who know what we have been working towards and who are going to celebrate with us or pick us up if we falter. So I think sports is a great opportunity you can be focused on a goal, but there's so much grace that comes before it. You have 2 practices and an opportunity in the game to try something new, and you get a scorecard at the end. Either you won the game or you lost the game. But I think another thing that's really important about this is whether you won or lost the game isn't necessarily dependent on that one move that you were trying to learn during the week. It's a cumulative result of all the things. That was it windy that day? Did everybody show up in a good mood? Was everybody there? Even though, on the headlines and things, there might be some toxic messages out there on the healthiest teams, they give themselves grace and they say it wasn't our best day. When we fail, we can say there are 50 reasons why we failed. It's not because that one shot got past the goalkeeper. That's unfortunate, and that is a part of it. But to even take that analogy further in soccer, the ball had to get past 10 other people before it got to the last line of defense, which is the goalkeeper. So there's a lot of grace for failure in sports. And that, to me, helps me have a more holistic view on failure and taking the chance and trying.
I love that. And when you talk about the accumulative result, I think that ties into how we started this conversation, which if you're applying this to career, your career is a cumulative result of all the things that you've done and tried and done well or not so well. And I wish we could see that through the lens of grace that we're not always going to get it right, but we sure as heck learned something in the process.
Yes. And that lens can allow us to grow. I think the opposite is we show up every day highly stressed. It's Monday. I'm stressed. I have a presentation. I need to nail it. I show up the next day. I have a big meeting with my boss. I need to nail it. And of course, we want to bring our best and do our best, but everything isn't always going to line up for us. So kind of having a bit of a growth mindset, with some of these trials that we have at work, I think there's a lot to learn from sports and some grace.
Yeah, absolutely. It is unrealistic to think that you're going to show up your best even 2 days a week.
Yes. Yes.
We're really being honest about it. And I have created an environment with my clients and my friends, and I've worked really intentionally on it over the last few years to open every conversation with grace, to be able to say to somebody, just kind of look at their face and be like, oh, this isn't their day. Like I can just feel it. I said that to somebody yesterday. They logged on. I was like, do you want to reschedule this call? And she just looked at me and she was like, what do you mean? I go, I just feel like you're having yourself a day, aren't you? And she said, oh my God, I really am. And the relief that just washed over her face just to be able to be herself in that moment. And ultimately we had the conversation, but just allowing somebody the option to say, if we need to do this another day, nobody dies. Like there is very little huge consequence to us pushing this off to a day that feels better for you to have this conversation. And what would the world be like if we showed up in business like that on a regular basis?
Absolutely. And I love that. I love that demonstration of grace and understanding and just the humanity. Really, it's just understand that we are all humans. And I think, at least I'll speak for myself, early in my career, I put such an emphasis on how I showed up, how I presented, and I can't demonstrate that I had having a bad day or whatever. And I think just the older I've gotten, I'm much more willing to just be forthcoming about, this is what's going on for me. I just let you know, this is how I'm showing up today. And then we can dialogue as humans and decide the best path forward for a business. But I'm making that human connection.
Yeah. And even today, you and I had never met. I'm trying to log on. Zoom is not having it. Not having it. There was a time not so long ago that would have freaked me out. Like, oh my gosh, I'm just meeting Anne and she's going to think I don't know how to do my job. And she's going to think I wasn't prepared and I should have logged on sooner. And this is all my fault. And I'm running her life by not having my Zoom together. What? I really look back on that version of myself and I think, girl, you destroyed a lot of brain cells worrying about stuff that you had zero control over, trying to make sure you showed up and looked like you had it all together.
Yes.
And it's so much more fun. And I'm so much better at my work now that I'm just like, hey, Ann, Zoom's being a little bitch today and I cannot get it to work. And we're just going to have to just keep trying.
Yep. I understand. And I'm so glad to be in this place. I'm in the same place you are, where it's just like, let's just let it be what it is. It's much healthier.
Absolutely. Much healthier for us and our colleagues, our family, our teams, the people we lead. How can we inspire people to show up with that grace that you talk about on the field of sports and what I just talked about with my example from yesterday? What does it take to get from that societal expectation that we're still operating off those old patterns of you got to show up and get it right? But what if we just saw us as a team that are out practicing every day and want to just high five and give ourselves grace? Like, how do you get there?
Gosh, I mean, to me, so much of it has to do with like modeling and any opportunity that we have to show our humanity in a low stakes way. Sometimes I have been like a lay reader at church. And just before I start to, read the message, it's like, let me just good morning, everybody. What do you got? Everybody, swimming here this morning. It's been raining. Everybody feeling like ducks, some humor, but something to kind of connect and make that connection point as humans. I think lets everybody kind of let a little air out. We can kind of breathe a little easier. So, and also being honest about our failures or our flaws, not beating them to death. That doesn't really serve anyone. But just saying, gosh, I'm just so glad to be here. I didn't think that this presentation was going to come together, but glad to be here. Or something, I don't know, something where we can say that we are human, that even if we look completely put together, we're also just somebody who has kids or who has, sick parents or whatever. There's a connection point that's outside of some of those more formal business structures and processes, so people can see that.
Because when I think about watching a sports team, going back to that analogy,
Yeah.
when a bad play happens, you see the good team members that are over there like, it's good, we got this, like high five,
Right.
smack on the ass, whatever it is.
Right.
Just to say, I see you and I still love and respect you, even though I know that didn't go well.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
taking that humanity into the workplace goes so, so far. In fact, it reminds me of a client and friend that just took on a new role. It was hugely elevated role, like senior vice president, Fortune 500 company, massive stewardship, massive responsibility. And we were together over July 4th. And I shout out Courtney Warren with ADP. And I said, okay, so when's your kickoff with your new team? She was like, it's next week. And she said, here's what I'm planning to say. And it was all what you just said. It was,
Right.
We've all been in a place where we got a new boss. We've all been in a place in sales where it's the new year and you're wondering, am I going to be able to do it again? And I didn't hit my goals last year. What's going to happen this year? Like the uncertainty of all that. And she
Right.
opened up this new relationship with this team, just saying, I remember trying to hit a goal going through a divorce. I remember trying to hit my goals when I got a new boss. I remember trying to, like, I'm human too.
Right.
And just as she was saying it, some of the folks that were sitting around the table that day, all of us got a little teary-eyed.
Yeah.
Because the way that she just evoked humanity
Right.
was so relaxing and so grace-filled. Even in that moment, talking about what was about to happen, just gives
Right.
us all this beautiful feeling of, oh, thank God we're all in this together. We are on the same team as humans. We really,
Yes.
we can be.
Yes, absolutely. And people want to have that sense of connection. And I think in my experience, work best for leaders who are willing to make that connection with them. You can have a hard driving leader who just says, here's the goal, here's the resources, I'll talk to you next quarter. And I don't know that really motivates people. I mean, it's clear on what they're working towards, but I don't know that it really pushes someone to step outside of what they're normally capable of to reach new heights. But when somebody says, hey, I've done these things and I've also suffered these setbacks along the way. So if there's something I can do or something that you need, let me know. Now I'm a lot more inspired to say, I'm going to work really hard for this person and show them what I can do. And I know, and I have the confidence that if something comes in my way, there'll be a conversation, not just a slap back, of
I'm safe to have that conversation
Yes.
with this person. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you bet. And back to what you said earlier, connecting the goal to who it's for and why it matters. Like that
Yes.
human connection, I find missing often, not always in a malicious sort of like just
Right.
hard charging leader who doesn't get it, but moving too quickly and forgot to talk about the context of who it's for and why it matters.
Yes.
Such a human connection point. It's like, hey, we're going to hit this goal, but here's why. And here's who it
Yes.
serves. And here's what it's about is so important.
Agreed. That just makes me think of, Simon Sinek's Start With Why, famous TED Talk. It's so important. People want to know what all this is for. Yes, we know the corporate vision and we know the corporate mission. We get it. But maybe in our sphere, in our small organization or in our team, what does reaching this goal really mean for us? Why is it important that we step up right now? I don't think you can effectively lead without it.
Agreed. You may have the title, but people are not rallying around your cause.
Right. 100%.
Once we wrap up today, because you work so much with people that are considering a transition or in transition, and I got to tell you, there are a lot of people out there considering transitions today,
Right.
either trying to move away from some of this leadership that isn't going so well or just inspired internally. I love that you approach things with like, it may sound basic, but boom, boom, boom. Like that's what we need as humans. Like, just give me a little nugget and tell me what to do. Like, what are some basics that you would advise to someone that's thinking about a transition right now? What steps could they take or what should they be thinking about?
Again, a very basic way to approach this would be taking a sheet of paper, drawing a vertical line down the middle, putting facts about what you're considering on one side in one column, and then putting feelings on the other, and kind of getting really clear about the fact is, I like the company, but the organization that I'm working within is not for me, or is, has had like 3 or 4 bad years or something like that. Whatever the fact of the matter is, our revenue's down year over year and I'm, whatever. And on the other side, like I'm scared or I'm feeling a lot of uncertainty. I'm feeling like I'm in limbo, like all of those emotions around it, but then all of the facts around it. And you can do the same thing in terms of what you're considering doing. I'm considering, let's say, going back to school, or I'm considering starting my own business. These are things that I'm thinking about doing. And, there's a fact that I've always been interested in law, or I've always been interested in this other field, but then the emotion next to it, so that we can start to separate what we know to be true from how we're feeling about it. Because usually we get stuck in a swirl where we just are bouncing back and forth between facts and feelings, because we can do something about how we're feeling about it. But the fact of the matter is there's certain facts. I don't want to say my boss won't change, but if you've worked for a boss for 5 years and they have acted a certain way for 5 years, you have a pretty strong demonstration of how your boss is going to show up. Let's just say, I mean, not in every case, but in a lot of cases. So it's kind of like, I'm unhappy in my job. I feel unhappy working with this boss. This boss has not changed in 5 years, probably is not going to change. Now, what do I want to do about it? So we're not just sitting there bemoaning the fact that I don't like my job, I don't like my boss, I'm unhappy, I don't like my job, I don't like well, let's get really clear on the fact and what we want to do about, so we can change that emotion and have a better emotion. And it might mean getting out of that situation. So just clearing the two and separating them, because they are,
instead of letting it just spin and spin and spin in our mind.
Yes, they inform each other, but we don't have to be miserable for the next 10 years of our careers because we're 10 years away from retirement. If the boss isn't going to leave, do we want to feel unhappy for the next 10 years? And you've seen that the boss isn't going to change. Maybe it's time for me to do something. Which I know is an oversimplification, but I do think it's important. I know when I have felt, speaking of, I don't know, failures, but uncomfortable, when I've been really triggered in conversations, and sometimes we get that point where it's like my blood is boiling, I'm reacting very strongly to something someone has said, and I'm not necessarily vocalizing it, but I'm having all of the nervous system reaction where I've gotten off the phone and said, okay, let me write down. He said this and this and this. He said that. He was correct. That was correct. That was accurate. And then I'm over here on the other column going, I don't like it when I start ranting. I don't like it when he does this, and I don't want to. So I'm trying to figure out, like, it's not the fact that he said all these things that were actually true. It's that maybe it's something about me that I can learn. I worked really hard on this project and it took me 25 hours and he's talking about the comma being in the wrong place. And it's kind of helping me learn about myself and what it is about the situation that isn't a fit for me. So long-winded way to answer your question, but.
So good. So good. Because it could be that what they said was a fact, but it triggered some old experience in you that bubbled up unexpectedly. But by taking that reflective pause, you can sort through some of that, because we are just patterns of the past that just keep showing up every day. And sometimes that's awareness that we need to go, oh, that isn't about him.
Right.
Me.
Because in this case, I didn't want to judge this person so unfairly, because I'm like, I know he's saying the truth, but why did I get so mad about this? So trying to, have that time to think through things. So it's really about clarity, I think.
Oh, those are so good. So good. last takeaway question, because you are great at these nuggets of basics that are so applicable, then that's what our listeners love. Let's do the same question with failure.
Okay.
So we could come about it both. We could either say the fear of failure, like I don't want to maybe try this because what if I fail? Or, and I did try something and it failed. Now what? I mean, I've tried some things. I've launched some programs that not a single solitary soul signed up for. And I spent weeks or months preparing it, launching it, and it was crickets. And I could say that failed, or I could say, well, apparently I didn't meet the market what they needed, or I learned this from, I've learned, but there's still an emotion that goes, well, that sucks.
Right.
What are some basic tidbitty kind of things around failure, either way?
Yeah. Yeah. So these are cliches basically, but I mean, in our house, I'm an athlete. We have a bunch of athletes in this house, and we say you either win or you learn. It's not that loss or failure is a bad word. It's not, but it's like, what did you learn from that loss? What did you learn from that failure? So really maintaining the focus on, yes, you are allowed, and we're all allowed to have a fit and be upset and cry and go through the grief process. But on the other side of that, 24 hours-ish coming back around, we've got to be able to take something away from it. So what did you learn? Did you win or you learn? And then the other thing that I think of a lot is what it is that failure has to teach us, or fear has to teach us. So, somebody says everything you want is on the other side of fear. So I have actually on my phone a picture of a wall that's being burst through with fear. There's like a fear that's kind of causing the bricks to crumble. And so for me, it motivates me to say, if everything I want is on the other side of fear, then how can I break apart those fears kind of brick by brick? So, if I'm afraid of launching a program or whatever, it's kind of like, okay, what's a way that I can get some feedback before I make that launch to try to find out if this is a winning thing, which, by the way, I share in your failure. I've done the same thing. Where I've spent hours and hours and weeks putting something together, launched it, and everybody says, crickets. And I say, oh my gosh, I can't do that again. That was expensive, and there's a personal embarrassment that no one else feels. It's not a big deal, but personal pride gets hurt. So I try to say, okay, if it's on the other side of fear, and if fear is like this big wall separating me from what I want, how can I tick out like a little Jenga block? How can I tick one of those bricks out, and the next brick, what's the smallest step I can take to get those fear, to break down the wall of fear to get to the other side? So small steps, breaking things into small increments that feel less scary than the entire brick wall that we're trying to bust through.
This is so funny, because this morning in my quiet time, I was reading the Bible, and the message was very clear that said, when you're faced with fear, get to work. And it's going to be a part of the work. And it sounds sometimes, like you said, trite or basic or simple. But to me, if it seems basic or trite or simple, it's exactly what I need to do. Just take action on something, whether it's taking out a piece of paper and making the list that you said, facts and feel, that's an action. That's getting to work. Yes. Or it's literally go try the thing and just be okay. Learn from whatever. It's either try the new career. It's either going to work, or it's not. But get to work on something. Yes.
So there's a great book. I don't have it here next to me. It's called Start. I think it's by John Acuff. I can't remember, but it's called just Start. It's red and white book, and it's great. And it's all about just taking that first action. I'm sure there's Mel Robbins, I'm sure, has a book on the same thing, but it has a lot of, I think, powerful kind of images in the book. Basically that first domino to fall. It's just the first domino. I mean, can knock down thousands of dominoes, but you actually do have to start the thing. And back to what you were asking me about change, I have a lot of clients who are like, yeah, I think I want to do the thing. I don't know if I want to do the thing. I'm kind of thinking about the thing. I don't know. And they just go in circles, being stuck. And they're like, do you think I should apply for the job? Whatever. And I'm like, you could apply for this job. You could apply for a job at McDonald's, but you have to do something. And I'm being broad brushstrokes here. Yeah. But it's a data point. We don't have data points if we are just ruminating and staring at the ceiling fan and thinking of all the possibilities. We have to get data and work every action that we take is going to produce a reaction. So we need to go do something so we can see how we feel, even if it's having a coffee with somebody. Be like, oh, I love that. I'm even more excited. Or, oh my gosh, I don't think this industry is what I want, or whatever. But you have to do something to get get the information.
So taking an action either tells us how we're feeling, it gives us a data point, it moves us forward, or it says no. Like, I love, because that appeals to anybody, whether they're a very data-driven person or whether they base things off of their feelings.
Right.
Like, all of that is encompassed in that. It's like, just take an action and either see how it feels or see what data that it gives you. That's good.
Yes.
I'm glad we've met. Let's be friends.
Yes.
Connected.
Yes. I love that. It's wonderful. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Speaking of staying connected, I would love our listeners to connect with you on LinkedIn is a good way, don't you think, to see what you put out into the world? Is that kind of your place that you hang out?
That's where I am the most.
And what is your just standard name? Is there anything weird about how to get you on LinkedIn?
Nope. It's Ann Shoemaker. You'll see I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm on Instagram also at Career Advisor Ann. Some more personal and some mix of business in there. You get both. But LinkedIn is definitely where I love to connect with people.
Awesome. And I know you've got some free downloads on your site that people can go and grab on your website. We'll put that link in the show notes. And if you need a coach or a keynote speaker, you're available for that too, right?
That's right. Yes. Thank you.
I'm so glad you were here. Thanks for listening to this episode. I would love it if you would go to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. And then you can go to RebeccaFleetwoodHession.com and join the Badass Women's Council. And if you really want to take a deeper dive, join the movement of 1,000 Thriving Women. There's amazing Thrive tools there for you today. Love you, mean it.
And I'm not coming down.
Hey y'all, fun fact, if you like the music for the podcast, that is actually my son, Cameron Hession. And I would love it if you would go to Spotify and iTunes and follow him and download some of his other music. My personal favorite is TV Land.